The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, its contents informing me that I was being fined $500 for installing an unauthorized backup generator on my property in Riverside County, California. I read it twice, then a third time, because surely this had to be some kind of joke. My name is Owen Xavier, and I had lived in the Sunset Ridge community for exactly 8 months. The neighborhood was one of those cookie-cutter developments that had sprung up in the hills outside Murrieta, with identical beige houses and manicured lawns that all looked like they had been stamped from the same mold. When my wife Sarah and I bought the place, we thought we were getting a good deal. The realtor never mentioned that the Homeowners Association president was a woman named Patricia Henderson, who ran the HOA board like her own personal fiefdom. The generator in question was a Generac unit I had installed 3 weeks earlier, following the county's updated fire safety ordinance. After the devastating wildfires that had torn through Southern California over the past few years, Riverside County had enacted strict new requirements. Every home in designated fire hazard zones needed to have a backup power source capable of running essential systems during power shutoffs. Our neighborhood sat right in the middle of one of these zones. I pulled out my phone and called the number listed on the letter. A woman answered on the second ring. Sunset Ridge, HOA. This is Patricia Henderson speaking. Hi, this is Owen Xavier from 445 Maple Grove Drive. I just received a fine notice about my backup generator, and I think there has been some kind of mistake. No mistake, Mr. Xavier. Her voice was clipped and efficient, the kind of tone that suggested she had made up her mind before I even called. Section 7.3 of the HOA covenants clearly states that no exterior mechanical equipment may be installed without prior written approval from the Architectural Review Committee. I understand that, but this is not optional. The county fire code requires every home in our zone to have backup power. I have the documentation right here. That is not my concern, Mr. Xavier. You violated the HOA rules, and you will need to remove the generator or pay the fine. Additionally, you will be fined $100 per day until the violation is corrected. My hand tightened around the phone. $100 per day? Are you serious? Completely serious. The rules exist for a reason. If we let everyone just install whatever they want, this neighborhood would look like a junkyard. You have 7 days to comply or the daily fines begin. She hung up before I could respond. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the phone in disbelief. The generator sat outside on a concrete pad near the side of the house, exactly where the county inspector had recommended. It was painted to match the house exterior, surrounded by a decorative screen and barely visible from the street. I had done everything by the book, including getting the proper permits from the county. Sarah came home from work around 6 that evening. She taught 4th grade at a school in Temecula, and she looked exhausted as she set her bag down on the kitchen counter. "How was your day?" she asked. I handed her the letter. She read it, her eyes widening. "They cannot be serious. The county requires this. We could be fined by the county if we do not have it." That is exactly what I told her. She did not care. Sarah set the letter down and rubbed her temples. "Who did you talk to?" "Patricia Henderson, the HOA president." "Great." Sarah had met Patricia exactly once at a mandatory new homeowner orientation meeting. The woman had spent 45 minutes lecturing everyone about trash can placement and acceptable mailbox designs. "What are we going to do?" "I'm going to the next HOA meeting. It is Thursday night. I will bring the county ordinance and explain the situation." Sarah looked skeptical. "You think that will work?" "It has to. We are legally required to have this generator. They cannot fine us for following the law." The next 2 days crawled by. I did my work as a software engineer from my home office, but I kept getting distracted by the absurdity of the situation. I printed out copies of the county fire code, the permit documents, and the inspection certificate. I even called the county fire marshal's office to get a letter confirming that our property was indeed required to have backup power. The woman I spoke with, Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez, was sympathetic. "We have been getting calls about this from HOA residents all over the county. Some of these associations are giving people a really hard time. Legally, county code supersedes HOA regulations. You should be fine." "Should be?" "Well, it might require some education on their part. Sometimes HOA boards think they have more authority than they actually do." But the law is clear. Fire safety requirements take precedence. Thursday evening arrived, and I drove to the community clubhouse where the HOA meetings were held. The building was a bland structure that matched the neighborhood aesthetic, with a meeting room that smelled like stale coffee and air freshener. About 20 residents were scattered across the folding chairs, most of them looking like they would rather be anywhere else. Patricia Henderson sat at the front table with 4 other board members. She was in her early 50s, with blonde hair cut in a severe bob and the kind of rigid posture that suggested she had never relaxed a day in her life. She wore a navy blazer and pearls, looking more like she was attending a corporate board meeting than a neighborhood HOA gathering. The meeting started with the usual tedium: discussion of landscaping contracts, approval of last month's minutes, a debate about whether the pool hours should be extended. I waited through 30 minutes of mind-numbing procedural matters before Patricia finally asked if there was any new business. I raised my hand. "Yes, Mr. Xavier." She looked at me over her reading glasses, her expression suggesting she had been expecting this. I stood up, holding my folder of documents. "I received a fine notice about my backup generator. I would like to address this with the board because I believe there has been a misunderstanding about the county fire code requirements." "There is no misunderstanding," Patricia said. "You installed exterior equipment without approval. The fine stands." If I could just explain. The time for explanation was before you installed the equipment. You chose to act without permission. A few other residents were watching now, interested in the conflict. I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm. The county fire code, specifically Ordinance 2024-15, requires all homes in designated high fire risk zones to have backup power capability. Our neighborhood is in Zone 3, which means this is not optional. I have the documentation here. I walked forward and placed copies on the table in front of the board members. Patricia barely glanced at them. "County codes do not override our HOA covenants. These rules were established to maintain property values and neighborhood aesthetics." "Actually, they do." I pulled out another document. California Civil Code Section 4746 specifically states that HOA restrictions cannot prohibit the installation of equipment required by law. I also have a letter here from the county fire marshal confirming that backup generators are mandatory in our zone. One of the other board members, a gray-haired man named Dennis, picked up the documents and started reading. "Patricia, maybe we should look at this." "There is nothing to look at," Patricia said sharply. "The rules are the rules." "But if the county requires it," Dennis began, "then people should have thought about that before moving into a community with HOA regulations." Patricia's jaw was set in a hard line. "We cannot just ignore our covenants because someone found a county ordinance that they think supersedes them." "It does not matter what I think," I said, my frustration growing. "This is the law. You cannot fine people for complying with fire safety requirements." "Watch me," Patricia said. "The fine stands, and the daily penalties will begin if you have not removed the generator by Monday. This meeting is adjourned." She banged a gavel before anyone else could speak. I stood there, stunned. Several other residents gave me sympathetic looks as they filed out. Dennis approached me, looking uncomfortable. "Sorry about that," he said quietly. "Patricia can be difficult. But she is technically right that you should have gotten approval first." "Even for something required by law?" Dennis shrugged. "I would talk to a lawyer if I were you. This is above my pay grade." I drove home, fuming. Sarah was waiting up, and I told her everything. "So what now?" she asked. "Now I find a lawyer." The next morning, I started making calls. The third attorney I contacted, a woman named Michelle Brennan, who specialized in HOA disputes, agreed to meet with me that afternoon. Her office was in a small building in Temecula, decorated with tasteful art and comfortable furniture that suggested she did well in her practice. Michelle was in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a professional bun and sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened to my story, reviewed my documents, and nodded several times. "You have a solid case," she said. "The law is very clear on this. Civil Code 4746 exists specifically to prevent HOAs from blocking legally required safety equipment. The county ordinance is mandatory, not optional." "So what do I do?" "First, I will send a letter to the HOA explaining the legal situation and demanding they rescind the fine. That might be enough to resolve it, HOAs usually back down when they realize they are wrong. And if they do not, then we file a lawsuit. You would be seeking an injunction to prevent them from enforcing the fine, plus attorney fees and damages. Given the circumstances, you would almost certainly win. How much would that cost? My retainer is $5,000, but in HOA, cases where the association is clearly violating the law, you can usually recover your attorney fees. So it would not cost you much in the end. I thought about it. $5,000 was a lot of money up front, but paying the HOA fines would cost even more. Do it. Send the letter. Michelle drafted a strongly worded letter citing the relevant statutes and case law. She sent it certified mail that same day. According to the tracking, Patricia Henderson signed for it on Monday morning. The response came Wednesday, not from Patricia, but from an attorney representing the HOA. The letter was 2 pages of legal jargon that essentially said the HOA had the right to enforce its covenants and that I needed to comply or face continued fines. Michelle called me after she received a copy. They are digging in. This is unusual. Most HOAs would back off at this point, but the good news is that their legal position is completely wrong, which means we will definitely win if this goes to court. How long will that take? Probably a few months. We will file for a preliminary injunction right away to stop the fines while the case proceeds. Given how clear-cut the law is, the judge should grant it quickly. Let's do it. Michelle filed the lawsuit the following week. The daily fines had already started accumulating. I was up to $700 in penalties, on top of the original $500 fine. The HOA's attorney filed a response arguing that the covenants took precedence and that I had violated the procedures by not seeking approval first. The preliminary injunction hearing was scheduled for 3 weeks out. In the meantime, Patricia Henderson seemed determined to make my life miserable in other ways. I received violation notices for my trash cans being visible from the street 30 minutes before pickup time. Another notice claimed my lawn had unauthorized weed growth, though I could not find a single weed. A third notice said my house numbers were not the approved font. Each violation came with a $50 fine. Sarah was furious. She is harassing you because you stood up to her. I know, but Michelle says we can add all of this to the lawsuit. It actually helps our case because it shows a pattern of vindictive behavior. The preliminary injunction hearing took place in Riverside County Superior Court on a rainy Tuesday morning. Michelle wore a sharp black suit and carried a briefcase full of documents. The HOA was represented by their attorney, a young guy named Marcus Webb who looked fresh out of law school. The judge was a woman in her 60s named Judge Sandra Martinez. She listened to both sides present their arguments, though Marcus Webb seemed to be struggling. He kept insisting that the HOA had the right to enforce its rules, but he could not get around the fact that state law explicitly said otherwise. Judge Martinez cut him off mid-sentence. "Counselor, are you arguing that an HOA covenant can override a mandatory fire safety ordinance?" "No, Your Honor, but because that is what this sounds like. The county requires backup generators in fire risk zones. This property is in a fire risk zone. The plaintiff installed a generator in compliance with county requirements. Where is the HOA's authority to prohibit this?" Marcus flipped through his notes. "The covenants require approval for any exterior installations. The plaintiff did not seek approval. Did the plaintiff notify the HOA about the installation? Well, no formal application was submitted." "Mr. Xavier," the judge turned to me, "did you inform the HOA about the generator?" I stood up. "Yes, Your Honor. I sent an email to the Architectural Review Committee 2 days before installation, explaining that I was installing a required generator and providing the county permit information. I never received a response." "Do you have proof of this email?" Michelle handed up a printed copy. The judge read it, then looked at Marcus Webb. "So he did notify you. He was complying with a legal requirement. On what basis is the HOA fining him?" Marcus looked uncomfortable. "The HOA president believes that the approval process should have been followed regardless of the county requirement. The HOA president's beliefs do not supersede state law." Judge Martinez made some notes. "I am granting the preliminary injunction. The HOA is prohibited from collecting any fines related to the generator installation. Furthermore, any fines already assessed are suspended pending the outcome of this case. Mr. Xavier, you are not required to pay anything at this time. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Additionally, Judge Martinez continued, I am ordering the HOA to cease any retaliatory actions against Mr. Xavier. That includes excessive violation notices for minor issues. If this continues, I will consider sanctions. Marcus nodded quickly. Understood, Your Honor. We left the courthouse and Michelle turned to me with a satisfied smile. That went better than expected. Judge Martinez clearly has no patience for HOA overreach. So what happens now? Now we wait for the full trial, but honestly, I expect the HOA to settle. They have no leg to stand on and they just got embarrassed in court. Their attorney is going to advise them to drop this. She was half right. The HOA's attorney did advise them to drop it. Patricia Henderson refused. Over the next month, the situation escalated in ways I never anticipated. Patricia apparently decided that if she could not fine me for the generator, she would find other ways to assert control. She started showing up at my house unannounced, taking photos of my property from the sidewalk. She sent certified letters claiming various violations. My porch light was the wrong color temperature. My doormat was not regulation size. My mailbox had a small scratch that needed immediate repair. Each letter was carefully worded to avoid being an obvious retaliation, but the intent was clear. She was trying to bury me in paperwork and minor fines. Other neighbors started reaching out to me. A man named Carl Donovan, who lived 2 streets over, called me one evening. I heard about what you are going through with Patricia, he said. I want you to know you are not alone. She has been terrorizing this neighborhood for 3 years. Why does not anyone do something? Most people just pay the fines and try to stay off her radar. A few families have moved because they could not deal with it anymore. But what you are doing, fighting back, that takes guts. A bunch of us have been talking. We want to help. Help how? We are organizing. There's going to be an election for the HOA board in 3 months. We want to vote Patricia out and put in people who will actually represent the homeowners instead of acting like petty dictators. This was interesting. How many people are on board? At least 30 families so far, maybe more. Patricia won the last election because nobody ran against her, but this time will be different. Over the next few weeks, I attended several informal meetings with other homeowners. The stories they shared were infuriating. Patricia had fined one family for having a vegetable garden in their backyard, claiming it violated aesthetic standards even though it was not visible from the street. She had forced another family to remove a treehouse they built for their kids, saying it was an unauthorized structure. An elderly couple had been fined repeatedly for having medical equipment visible through their window. The more I learned, the more I realized this was not just about my generator. Patricia Henderson had been abusing her power for years, and nobody had challenged her because fighting an HOA was expensive and exhausting. But now people were ready to fight back. The trial date was set for late August, about 2 months away. Michelle was confident, but she warned me that trials were unpredictable. We have the law on our side, but you never know what a jury might do, and Patricia's attorney might come up with some creative argument we have not considered. In the meantime, Carl and the other neighbors moved forward with their election plans. They recruited 3 candidates to run against Patricia and her board allies, a retired engineer named Harold Thompson, a nurse named Jennifer Mills, and a small business owner named Victor Ramirez. All 3 were reasonable people who just wanted the HOA to focus on maintaining common areas and staying out of homeowners' lives. Patricia did not take the challenge well. She sent out a mass mailing to every house in the neighborhood, warning that the radical opposition would destroy property values and turn Sunset Ridge into a slum. She claimed that Harold, Jennifer, and Victor wanted to eliminate all standards and let people do whatever they wanted. It was pure fear-mongering, and most people saw through it. The election was held the first Tuesday in August at the clubhouse. I arrived early with Sarah, and the parking lot was already full. Inside, the room was packed with residents I had never seen at an HOA meeting before. Patricia stood at the front with her allies, looking increasingly nervous as more people filed in. The voting was done by paper ballot. After everyone cast their votes, a volunteer counting committee retired to a back room to tally the results. It took almost an hour. When they emerged, the head of the committee, an older woman named Dorothy Chen, who was not running for any position, read the results. For the position of HOA president, Harold Thompson, 112 votes, Patricia Henderson, 43 votes. The room erupted in applause. Patricia's face went pale, then red. She stood up abruptly, grabbing her purse. "This is a farce," she said loudly. "This community will regret this decision. You have just elected people who will destroy everything I built here." "You mean everything you controlled here?" someone called out. Patricia shot a venomous look in that direction, then stormed out of the room. Her board allies followed, looking shell-shocked. Harold Thompson stood up, looking a bit overwhelmed. He was a tall man in his late 60s, with kind eyes and a calm demeanor. "Well, that was dramatic. I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. We have a lot of work to do to repair the damage and rebuild trust in this community, but I promise you, we will run this HOA with transparency, fairness, and respect for homeowners' rights." More applause followed. Sarah squeezed my hand. "This is good. This is really good." The next morning, I received a call from Michelle Brennan. "You are not going to believe this. The HOA's attorney just called me. They want to settle." Seriously? Completely seriously. With the board election results, they do not want to keep fighting. They are offering to drop all fines, pay your attorney fees, and issue a formal apology. They will also amend the HOA covenants to explicitly allow equipment required by law. I felt a surge of vindication. What do you think? I think you should take it. You won. You could push for more, but this gives you everything you actually wanted, and it saves everyone the time and expense of a trial. Let's do it. The settlement was finalized within a week. The new HOA board, led by Harold Thompson, voted unanimously to approve the terms. Patricia Henderson did not attend the meeting. According to Carl, she had put her house on the market and was planning to move out of state. The formal apology was read at the next HOA meeting. Harold himself delivered it, acknowledging that the previous board had acted improperly and violated state law. The new board also announced a comprehensive review of all HOA rules to eliminate outdated or overly restrictive provisions. "We are here to serve the community, not control it," Harold said. "If anyone has concerns about HOA actions or feels they have been treated unfairly, my door is always open." In September, the HOA officially amended its covenants to include a provision that explicitly allowed any equipment or modifications required by federal, state, or local law. The Architectural Review Committee was also reformed with clear guidelines and reasonable response times. But the story did not end there. In October, I received a call from Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez. "Mr. Xavier, I wanted to follow up with you about your generator situation. I heard through the grapevine that things got resolved with your HOA." "They did, thankfully. New board, new policies." "That is great to hear. The reason I am calling is that we have been documenting cases of HOAs interfering with fire safety compliance. Your case is one of the most clear-cut examples we have found. Would you be willing to testify at a county supervisors meeting? We are pushing for a new ordinance that would impose penalties on HOAs that obstruct legally required safety measures." I agreed immediately. The meeting was held 2 weeks later at the county administration building in Riverside. The supervisor's chamber was an impressive room with tiered seating and a long desk at the front where the 5 elected supervisors sat. Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez presented first, explaining how HOA obstruction of fire safety requirements posed a genuine risk to public safety. Then she called me to testify. I told my story, explaining how I had followed all the proper procedures and installed a required generator, only to be fined and threatened by my HOA. I brought copies of all the documentation, the violation notices, the fine letters, Patricia Henderson's increasingly aggressive correspondence. One of the supervisors, a woman named Janet Wilkins, looked visibly angry as she reviewed the documents. "This is unconscionable. You were complying with a county fire safety ordinance, and your HOA was trying to punish you for it." "That's correct. And I was lucky enough to be able to afford an attorney. A lot of people would have just removed the generator and hoped for the best, even though that would have left them in violation of county code." Another supervisor, Thomas Garrett, nodded. We cannot let HOAs undermine public safety requirements. I move that we adopt the proposed ordinance with an amendment that includes financial penalties for HOA boards that obstruct compliance with fire safety measures. The motion passed unanimously. The new ordinance established that any HOA that fined, penalized, or otherwise obstructed homeowners from complying with mandatory fire safety requirements would be subject to county fines of up to $10,000, plus reimbursement of any legal fees incurred by affected homeowners. After the meeting, several reporters approached me. The story had attracted local media attention, and it ran in the Riverside Press Enterprise the next day under the headline, "Homeowners Fight Against HOA Leads to New Safety Protections." The article quoted me, Deputy Fire Marshal Rodriguez, and Supervisor Wilkins. It also mentioned Patricia Henderson by name, noting that she had declined to comment. The piece sparked a broader conversation about HOA overreach in California, and I started receiving emails and calls from people across the state who had dealt with similar issues. One call came from a producer at a Los Angeles TV station who wanted to do a longer feature story. I agreed, and a camera crew came to my house in November. They filmed the generator, interviewed me and Sarah, and even got Harold Thompson to talk about the reforms the new HOA board had implemented. The segment aired during evening news and generated even more attention. I appeared on 2 radio shows to discuss HOA reform. A state assemblyman contacted me about potentially sponsoring legislation to strengthen homeowner protections statewide. Throughout all of this, Patricia Henderson remained silent and largely invisible. Her house sold in December, and she moved to Arizona according to neighborhood gossip. I never spoke to her again after that contentious HOA meeting where she refused to back down. Looking back, the whole experience taught me several important lessons. First, that standing up to petty tyranny is worth it, even when it is expensive and stressful. Second, that most people are reasonable and will support you if you are clearly in the right. And third, that systems designed to protect property values can easily become tools of oppression if the wrong people gain control. The backup generator still sits on its concrete pad beside my house, humming to life during our monthly test runs. It has never been needed for an actual emergency, though we have had a couple of close calls when fire weather conditions triggered precautionary power shutoffs in nearby areas. Every time I hear it running, I think about how absurd it was that I had to fight my own HOA just to comply with fire safety requirements. But I also think about the positive changes that came from that fight. The Sunset Ridge community is a better place now, with a board that actually listens to homeowners and rules that make sense. Other HOAs in Riverside County have reformed their policies to avoid running afoul of the new ordinance, and countless homeowners have told me that my story gave them courage to challenge unfair HOA actions in their own communities. Sarah and I still live in the same house. We love the neighborhood, especially now that we do not have to worry about Patricia Henderson showing up with a tape measure and a clipboard. Our neighbors are friendly, the schools are good, and the community pool is finally open until 9 on weekends like people wanted. Harold Thompson proved to be an excellent HOA president. He is fair, responsive, and genuinely interested in making the neighborhood a good place to live, rather than a perfectly controlled suburban laboratory. The Architectural Review Committee now responds to requests within 2 weeks and approves anything that is reasonable and complies with the law. Meetings are shorter and less contentious. The HOA focuses on things that actually matter, maintaining common areas, organizing community events, and handling legitimate issues like street lighting and landscaping. In March of the following year, I was invited to speak at a state legislative hearing on HOA reform. The committee was considering several bills to strengthen homeowner protections and limit HOA authority. I testified alongside consumer advocates, attorneys, and other homeowners who had experienced HOA abuses. One of the bills that eventually passed was nicknamed the Xavier Amendment by some of the advocates, though it was officially titled the Homeowner Safety Protection Act. It established clear statewide standards prohibiting HOAs from interfering with legally required safety equipment, including generators, fire-resistant landscaping, and emergency water supplies. It also created a streamlined process for homeowners to challenge improper HOA actions and recover their costs. The governor signed it into law in September, and it took effect January 1st of the next year. I received a ceremonial pen from the signing ceremony, which I keep in my home office as a reminder of the whole experience. The best part of all this was not the legal victories or the policy changes, though those were satisfying. It was the sense of community that developed among the homeowners who had been frustrated with Patricia Henderson's authoritarian approach. We organized regular neighborhood gatherings, potlucks, movie nights in the park, a 4th of July barbecue. People who had lived next door to each other for years without really connecting became friends. Carl Donovan and his family became close friends with Sarah and me. We have dinner together regularly and our kids play together. Harold Thompson and his wife have us over for occasional Sunday brunches where we talk about everything except HOA business. Jennifer Mills organized a neighborhood watch program that actually focuses on looking out for each other rather than reporting covenant violations. The community that emerged from the conflict was stronger and more connected than the one that existed before. Patricia Henderson had tried to control the neighborhood through fear and rigid enforcement of petty rules. When she was removed from power, people discovered they could actually work together and create something better. I occasionally wonder what happened to Patricia. Did she learn anything from the experience, or did she just move to a new place and find new people to control? I hope she found some peace, but I suspect that people like her rarely change. They need to feel powerful, and an HOA board is the perfect vehicle for someone who craves authority without having to earn genuine respect. As for me, I'm just glad to live in a place where I can keep my family safe without having to fight my own neighbors about it. The backup generator is there if we need it, compliant with both county requirements and HOA rules. My trash cans can sit out for a few extra minutes without triggering a violation notice. My doormat can be whatever size I want. These might seem like small things, but they represent something important: the basic freedom to live in your own home without constant surveillance and harassment. That is what I fought for, and that is what we won. The generator continues to sit quietly beside my house, a testament to a battle that should never have been necessary, but that ultimately made things better for everyone involved. Well, everyone except Patricia Henderson. But sometimes you cannot please everyone, and sometimes the people who are displeased are exactly the ones who needed to lose their power anyway. Life in Sunset Ridge is good now. The HOA does what it is supposed to do: manage common areas, enforce reasonable standards, and stay out of people's way. Property values have actually increased since the board change, despite Patricia's dire predictions of neighborhood decline. Turns out, people prefer living in communities where they are treated like adults rather than children who need constant supervision. My favorite moment came about 18 months after the whole generator controversy began. Harold Thompson called a special meeting to present the annual HOA financial report. The previous board under Patricia had never shared detailed financial information, claiming it was too complicated for regular homeowners to understand. Harold and the new treasurer, Victor Ramirez, prepared a clear presentation showing exactly where all the HOA fees went. They also revealed something shocking under Patricia's leadership. The HOA had been spending nearly 30% of its budget on legal fees, fines, and enforcement actions. Most of that money had gone to attorneys who sent threatening letters to homeowners over minor violations. "We have cut that spending by 90%, Victor explained. "We are now using that money for things that actually benefit the community: better landscaping, playground equipment upgrades, and a reserve fund for major repairs. We are also lowering HOA fees by 15% next year." The room burst into applause. Lower fees and better services, that is what good governance looks like. As I drove home that night, Sarah and I talked about how much had changed. "Remember when we first got that fine notice?" she said. "I was so scared. I thought we might have to move or spend our entire savings fighting the HOA. I know, it was terrifying. But I'm glad we fought. Otherwise, we would have just been the latest people Patricia Henderson bullied into submission." Do you think it was worth all the stress? I thought about that carefully. The months of legal battles, the constant violation notices, the worry about mounting fines, it had been one of the most stressful periods of my life. But then I thought about the positive outcomes. The new county ordinance protecting other homeowners, the state legislation strengthening homeowner rights, the transformation of our community from a place of fear and control to one of cooperation and mutual respect. Yeah, I said finally. It was definitely worth it. Sarah smiled and squeezed my hand. Good, because I was not looking forward to moving again. We pulled into our driveway, and I noticed the backup generator sitting in its spot, partially hidden by the decorative screen. The indicator light showed green, everything functioning properly, ready to protect our home if needed. That generator had become more than just a piece of equipment. It was a symbol of the right to make your own decisions about your property, the importance of standing up to petty tyrants, and the power of community when people work together for positive change. I like to think that somewhere out there, other homeowners dealing with overreaching HOAs might have heard my story and found the courage to push back. Not everyone can afford to fight, and not every battle is winnable, but sometimes standing up to bullies is the only way to stop them from hurting others. The Sunset Ridge community continues to thrive. We have new families moving in regularly, attracted by the reasonable HOA policies and the genuine sense of community. At a recent neighborhood barbecue, a new resident approached me. "Hey, are you Owen Xavier, the guy who fought the HOA about the generator?" I nodded, a bit embarrassed. I never quite got comfortable with being recognized for this. I just want to say thank you. My wife and I almost did not buy here because we were worried about HOA horror stories. But when we heard about how your community reformed and stood up to that crazy board president, we knew this was the right place. We need a generator too because of the fire code, and it is such a relief to know we will not get harassed about it. That is great to hear. Welcome to the neighborhood. Seriously though, what you did fighting back instead of just giving in, that takes real courage. You made this place better for everyone. Those words meant more to me than any legal victory or policy change, because at the end of the day, that was the whole point. Not to win for the sake of winning, but to make the community better for everyone who lived there. As the sun set over the Murrieta Hills that evening, I stood in my backyard with a beer in hand, watching my neighbors chat and laugh at the barbecue. Kids ran around playing tag while adults swapped stories and made plans for future gatherings. This was what a neighborhood was supposed to be, people living their lives, supporting each other, and not worrying about whether their mailbox was the approved shade of black. The backup generator hummed quietly through its monthly test cycle, a steady, reassuring sound that represented safety, compliance with the law, and hard-won freedom from arbitrary authority. I raised my beer in a silent toast to Patricia Henderson, wherever she was. Thank you for being such an unreasonable tyrant that you forced me to fight back. Thank you for being so inflexible that you unified the community against you. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes the only way to deal with a bully is to stand up and refuse to back down, no matter how much it costs or how long it takes. And thank you for leaving, so that the rest of us could finally turn this neighborhood into the kind of place where people actually want to live. The generator clicked off, its test cycle complete. Everything was functioning perfectly, just as it had been from the start. The only problem had been Patricia Henderson's refusal to accept that some rules like fire safety codes are more important than HOA covenants about aesthetic standards. In the end, the law had been clear, justice had prevailed, and the community had been transformed. Not a bad outcome for what started as a simple attempt to comply with fire safety requirements. I finished my beer and headed back to the barbecue, ready to enjoy the evening with neighbors who had become friends through shared adversity and common purpose. The fight was over, the victory was won, and life in Sunset Ridge had never been better. Sometimes standing up for what is right requires sacrifice, stress, and significant effort. But when you look around and see the positive changes that resulted from that struggle, you realize it was all worthwhile. My backup generator was not just about having power during emergencies, it was about having the power to resist unjust authority and create positive change. And that is a kind of power that every homeowner should have.